Puritanism. Puritanism, I suppose, can be roughly described as the phenomenon which applies in many parts of human life, whereby you cut things down to the essentials, to the pure form, and any excesses and embroideries and superfluous things are eliminated. And so you can have Puritanism in art, obviously, and I'll talk about that a little bit, where you just have very simplified forms and colours. You can have Puritanism in morals, so that you behave in a very strict Calvinist, Puritan sort of way. You can have Puritanism in lifestyles. You live extremely simply, you don't waste money or time on anything, and so it can go across all sorts of parts of your life. It's something that has interested me a lot. Academically, it really interested me from, I suppose, my sixth form, and certainly at Oxford. I studied history, and the period I really liked and found most interesting was the later 16th and the 17th century, the period of the Puritans. And I did a special subject on Cromwell, the leader of the Puritans, and found the writings of Puritan poets and the attempt to reform government by Puritan politicians to be very absorbing. And my teacher, Lady Rosalind Clay, was particularly interested in Puritanism and taught me that Puritanism revolved around the bringing God right into your heart and then reforming your life as a result of it. It was all part also of the interest of great sociologists like Max Weber, the Protestant ethic. Protestant there is almost a synonym for Puritanism. He could have called it the Puritan ethic. That is being very careful with time and money and space and other things. So I was interested intellectually in it because I think partly because I was a Puritan myself. I remember as a sign of this that when I was given a book that would be suitable for my character at the age of 17 by my history master, he gave me a book called South Wind by Norman Douglas, and that's a huge hymn of praise to the opposite of Puritanism. It's all about beautiful, sensual life in the Mediterranean, and he obviously thought I was a bit of a young Puritan, which I was. I was evangelical Christian in a mild way, and I lived in a sober and dedicated, hard-working, conscious of time sort of way. And so that's how I was brought up. My mother wasn't exactly Puritan, but she was later a vegetarian and a Buddhist and careful about things. And certainly my uncle, who was a Protestant, evangelical. And so I was instilled in that. And then I went to these tough Puritan schools. The Yorkshire school that I went to was really, it was in the heart of the Quaker, and the Quakers were very strict with their lives and Puritan. And so I went to this school, which was one of these schools where you ran up the mountains before breakfast and had cold baths and only wore one shirt and so on. And it was very tough on the mind and on the body. Its motto was a hard nurse of men, dura virum nutrix. And we were being toughened up to run the British Empire, I suppose. And it was extremely Puritan in keeping the food and the living very simple. And so when I went to Oxford, which was the opposite and becoming much more pandering to the senses, I felt a great sense of escape and relief. And my first girlfriend dedicated her considerable energies and knowledge to teaching me about wine and about French literature and new wave films and things to make my Puritanism less unattractive. So my life has been a movement away from that, although still I live a very simple life in many ways, work hard, organize my time, don't lash out on consumer durables or expensive food or anything. And that's obviously abetted and helped by the fact that I'm married to a very Puritan lady, Sarah, who is the ultimate Quaker sort of lady, very simple in her needs and desires and careful with everything, money, time. So Puritanism has seeped through my life, and I've realized that it is a strength in my life. And I found it interesting both as a theme right through British life. The university I'm at, Cambridge University, was the home of many great Puritans like John Milton and Cromwell and others, and continues to be quite an ascetic sort of place, especially compared with Oxford and other universities. So I live in a Puritan university, in a Puritan home. And so when I went to other cultures, I was on the lookout for this sort of thing. And the one where I found it most extreme and graphic was, strangely, in Japan. Now, Japan, to some people's minds, is also a place of excess, sexual excess, and excess in certain other forms. But it's also very well known for its very Puritan kind of art and religion. It's religion, a mixture of particularly Zen and other Buddhist traditions, is very restrained. I can't think of anywhere where I feel that sense of Puritanism stronger than in the Zen monasteries and temples in Kyoto. You go into these buildings along the mountainside, and there is nothing except the building and lawns, carefully kept, and water and raked gravel. Zen gardens are just stones with a few rocks on them, and the buildings themselves are completely empty, no furniture, nothing, just the building. And so the self-examination, the cutting everything down to pure thought and eliminating all emotion and superfluous things is carried to its extreme in Zen, but it's also there in many aspects of Japanese life, even down to its manufacturing, which is very elegant and restrained and miniature and functional, and in its design and in its colors. Some of the periods of Japanese art are really about black and white. Tanizaki's great book, In Praise of Shadows, is about the virtues of simple black and white representations. So Japan is in part of it, because Puritanism is always a streak within other streaks, but part of it is very puritanical, and the similarities with Western Puritanism have been noted, and it's even been suggested that perhaps this explains why Japan was the first great economic superpower in Asia, that the Protestant ethic was there. I don't think that's the major part, but it may be one part of it. Puritanism obviously there's a tension because it creates wealth, and Simon Sharma has written about this in relation to Holland, another famous Puritan area, that you have problems that by living very simply in Holland, you create huge amounts of wealth, and then what you do with them. And he showed some of the clever tricks. For example, you wear black and white, as in many Dutch paintings, but if you look at the black and white clothing, it's extremely luxurious sort of clothing, very well made and very expensive. So the problems of affluence within Puritanism, and the fact that monasteries, which are also often very Puritan, become extremely rich, is one of the internal contradictions and dimensions. But I'm not ashamed of my puritanism, but I'm aware that you can take it too far, and the occasional glass of wine does no one much harm.